cops of Reddit. What's the most bullet sounding excuse you got that actually turned out to be true? During a search of a person, I pulled out a bag of a sticky dark substance consistent with heroin. The subject had multiple drug priors and is a known heavy heroin user. He immediately tells me it is burnt sugar and he is pissed someone sold it to him. Long story short, when I tested the substance it did not test positive for heroin. I'm running booking one night. Guy gets brought in for possessing a truly stupendous amount of drugus. I'm talking like to rob a maid totes full of shrooms. A huge bag of weed up. And enough heroin to overdose half the county. Well, says he. I'm a informant and they told me to make the drop so they could be there and raid the crap out of everybody and let me go for helping. Aha. Right. Face left please. Guy is like, I'm telling you dude. They're gonna be super pissed that you country retards ducked up thigh bust. Whatever. Get in the holding cell and shut up. About 3 hours later 3 guys show up. D agents. They're super pissed that our deputies ducked up thigh bust. I go back to the holding cell to let the guy out. And he's just like, they're super pissed huh? Yeah? Told you so. Former marechaussee here. Look it up, it is a Dutch thing. Police but also military. We also had jurisdiction over the American soldiers stationed here. One day we got called over to a possible case of domestic violence. We arrive at the house and the guy opened wearing only underwear. He told us he and his wife were owl playing. Of course we didn't trust this and asked to see his wife. After denying us entry we told we would come back with a warrant. He reluctantly agreed to let us enter. So we go in and he opened the basement door and inside was the freakiest sex dungeon. I mean chains. Whips, things I couldn't identify hanging on the wall. And in the middle hanging in chains was his but naked, gagged wife. We asked her but she told everything was okay. Turned out they were really into some kinky stuff. Asked them to keep the screaming part in the basement until minimal. We did the whole thing with a straight face, but as soon as we were in the car, I went to a disturbance at a backyard BBQ once. Turns out it was a bunch of Roma gypsies. As I was trying to figure out what was going on, I had some old lady approach me and want to talk to me off to the side. She told me she was an informant for the FBI and that if I left, she would be able to get some information on a matter the FBI was interested in. I rolled my eyes and thanked her and said I would be out of there as soon as I could make sure there was no violence going on. Anyway, I determined it was just verbal, so I cleared the call and went back in service. About 15 to 30 minutes later dispatch radioed me to head back to the station. I got there and got a message to call some FBI field office and ask for a certain agent. I called and sure as shit this agent said he understood I spoke with his informant and wanted to know everything she told me. Blew my mind. Mid-July in like 2008. Young kid going 93 in a 55. I swing and he immediately pulls over. Approaching the car. His first words before I can even start speaking. My dog died. He hung himself. I gotta get back before my mom gets home. What JPG? Anyway. He calls other family members. His aunt, uncle and 2 cousins come out to the stop and between all their sobbing, they verify that the dog had actually hopped over the fence on a leash runner and couldn't get back over. Everyone's crying now. They showed me a photo on their phone. Apparently they found the dog and called the kid at work and he just left. I didn't even bother verifying further than that. Cousin drove the kid's car back so they could take care of the dog and prepare for mom. Some said that I should have wrote him. But losing an animal sucks enough. He knew he ducked up and adding financial burden to him wasn't going to help him or me. I got pulled over for driving to school at 10 AM. The cop wanted to know why I was skipping school. I explained that our little town's girls basketball team just won state and since the game was so far away they let us start that day at 10:30 AM. He followed me all the way to the school so he could ask the principal. I still don't know what was illegal about driving to school at 10 AM. But he was kind of a douche up. Okay, so I'm going to tell my crazy story as the person on behind the wheel. My uncle was divorcing his terrible wife. He was no saint but definitely on the right side of their divorce. The wife was still on the paperwork to take their two kids out of the school even though my uncle had temporary custody while the courts did their thing. She had previously threatened to take them both and just run away. So I don't know why she was still on the paperwork. On picture day that year, she showed up to the school and signed both kids out and disappeared. I was not involved in the crazy process of calling the police and tracking the kids down. But I was pulled from school that day because I had my driver's license and could be an extra pair of hands. They managed to find the kids and they were turned over my grandmother and mom. But my niece was distraught that she would be missing picture day. It was her first time away from her terrible mother and she was finally allowed to be a cheerleader. A dream in her tiny eyes. So, me having my car and nothing else better to do, offered to take her back to the school. My mom got the school to agree to keep the person there a little longer, but it was going to be by the skin of our teeth that we would make it as this was rural. Okay. We got in the car and I blasted down those dirt roads doing approx 70 in a 35. Not a good decision on my part, but I was an anxiety-ridden 17-year-old dealing with a nasty divorce and kidnapping for the first time in my life. We, of course, get pulled over. I'm freaking out cause I can't afford that bad of ticket and all the crap that was coming in that day. The cop listened to the story and ignored my barely held in tears and said he would let us off with a warning because he believed the story. And the only reason he believed the story was that he had just pulled over my uncle going the same speed the opposite direction on the same road and go the same story. Edit, my cousin. Not my niece. She has that sound in her name and I always get it wrong. And I have not idea if my uncle got a ticket as I was too self-absorbed at 17 to consider asking him. I was the one with the excuse. Forgot my keys at friend's place before going out drinking that night. Get home at 2 AM. No keys. Only one of our windows didn't have ghetto bars, so I took the screen out and starting pushing smacking it up. Locks were on the sides only providing friction. As I'm halfway in, I just feel whump. Got tackled into the house. The officer was still outside, holding on to my ankles. I look up and just said, "I'm astonished by your response time. I actually live here. Let me get up, unlock the door, and give you my ID." So I did. And he stares at it for a second, then says sorry and sprints off to look for the person they were actually in the area looking for. Not a cop, but I had a run-in with one that was really funny once. When I was 18, I was on a double date with a friend, and we stepped out of a restaurant to smoke. A cop came up and started harassing us, telling us there had been break-ins into cars in the area. Eventually, he said he needed to pat us down, and he pulled a brown paper bag out of my friend's pocket. He got a smug look on his face and asked, "So, what's in here?" "Huh?" My friend said. "The Emancipation Proclamation," with a completely straight face. The cop opened the bag, pulled out a small booklet, got embarrassed, and let us go. My friend had been to the Lincoln Museum earlier that day and did actually have a small copy of the Emancipation Proclamation in his pocket. Former cop here. I was behind a vehicle that couldn't stay in the lane. Kept swerving. etc. It was 1 AM. And I think another drunk idiot on the road. Pull him over. Guy is a straight up asshole to me. Cursed me out. Yelling at me. And I notice his speech is slurred. I get him out to car. And I can smell a fruity smell on his breath and he has to lean against the car for support. I ask him how much he had to drink and he tells me to duck off. By this point I'm ready to bring him in for a DUI. But I just had a feeling something wasn't right. I called EMS to come check him. Blood sugar was at 40. Not drunk. Just a diabetic. If I would have arrested him, he probably would have died before I finished the paperwork. Go with your gut if something doesn't seem right. I had a run-in with the cops a few years ago and I wonder exactly what they thought when they first stopped me. I had taken a cab back from a work party and I was pretty drunk. My friend and I had just moved to this new apartment, so I accidentally gave the cab driver the wrong address. I ended up on a block that looked very similar to mine and a building that looked like mine. There were 2 doors before getting to my apartment door, which was on the first floor. Like my apartment building, they left the first door unlocked and locked the second door. I kept trying my keys to open it but I couldn't and was confused. I went outside to look for my car and it wasn't parked there. That's when I realized I was on the wrong block. I started walking in the direction I thought my apartment was when a cop car pulls up. They ask me what I'm doing and I tell them I'm really drunk and I just want to go home, which was the honest truth. They told me they got a call about someone trying to get into an apartment building. I guess the people in that apartment building woke up and thought I was trying to break in. They were super suspicious of me at first, but eventually it became clear I was just some drunk idiot and not a burglar. They ran me through to make sure I didn't have warrants or anything, and when I checked out they offered me a ride home. The ride back was hilarious because when we were getting to my apartment I tried telling them that it was a bit complicated to get to because of all the one-way streets. The officer driving was like, "Who do you think you're with?" and then turned on the lights and went the wrong way down the street to get me home faster. It honestly felt like I was with the 2 cops from Superbird. This was my favorite story from my 4th grade teacher, not a cop. She went to a cousin's wedding in mid-July. The cousin had overestimated how much champagne they would need at the reception and was giving away bottles to anyone who was interested. So my teacher took 3 and put them in the backseat of her car. Again. This was a hot summer day in July. After saying their goodbyes, my teacher, her husband, and her parents piled into the car and pulled out onto the highway, where 2 bottles burst open, spraying champagne everywhere and causing quite a ruckus. Of course, while this was happening, the car was swerving as the driver was also getting bathed in sparkling champagne. So it came as no surprise that as soon as they collected themselves, they saw the familiar flashing lights of a state trooper and pulled over. According to my teacher, the first thing the cop said was, "I'm not gonna ask if you've been drinking because I can smell it from here." My teacher tried explaining what had happened, but the cop wouldn't hear of it and ordered everyone out of the car. That's when the cop saw that everyone, both drivers and passengers, were dressed in their finery, but soaked with champagne, and looking quite shaken. A cursory search showed the open bottles, but the cop still insisted on a quick sobriety check just to make sure. Not a cop, but I once got pulled over by a fire truck. It was Orlando, in August 1990. It was close to 100 outside. I worked for a computer rental company. We would rent computers to companies in town for trade shows, or for a lot of other situations. The company van was a ragged out Chrysler minivan with 180k miles on it. The AC didn't work, so the windows were down. I was coming back to the office in heavy rush hour traffic, and I found myself in a right turn only lane and couldn't get out in time. So I was forced to make the right turn. I hit the gas to speed up and get in front of people making a left turn into my same direction. I had to get all the way over to the left side to make a U-turn. So I cut off a fire truck to do it. One of the big squarish fire trucks with the flat front. I cut them off and got in the left turn lane to wait for the green arrow. I looked out the window to my left and saw a Dixie chopper lawnmower mowing the grass on the side of the road maybe 15 feet from me. It was already hot, but this tremendous wave of heat came in through the driver's side window. I thought, man, That's a hot lawn mower. The light turned green and I started my U-turn. Halfway through it, this cloud of, I thought, steam came out of the hood and covered the windshield so I couldn't see. The power steering also failed. So I fought the car, trying to get back to the gas station at the corner so I could find a payphone. Yes, that's how old I am. But because I couldn't see, I missed the turn and ended up turning into an apartment complex. About this time, the cloud stopped and I could see again. Still no power steering. So I fought the car to do a U-turn so I could get back to the gas station. At this point, the fire truck I had cut off turned into the apartment complex. Full lights. And blocked me in. 2 huge firefighters got out of the truck holding fire extinguishers like beer cans. "Excuse me, sir. Did you know your van was on fire?" Turns out while I was cutting them off, I had been shooting flames out from under the passenger side of the van. They hit the lights, did a U-turn, and came back to me. The wave of heat wasn't from the lawnmower. They checked out the van and let me go. The cause turned out to be a damaged power steering line. It sprayed power steering fluid all over the exhaust manifold and caught fire. TLDR, cut off a fire truck while on fire. Got pulled over by the fire truck. Edit, added TLDR. Thanks for the silver. Not a cop, but I did get stopped by one for eating a taco. I worked at a community college in LA that had a high school right next to it. Well, there was a lot of drugas sold through the fence at the high school, so there was always a cops driving up and down the street between the schools. Couldn't get a parking pass since I just worked at the school, so I always parked on that street. Hit up Taco Bell for lunch and was sitting in my car eating my double-decker tacos when a cop drove past. Next thing I know, he's flipping a U-turn and heading right for me. He slides to a stop driver window to driver window and yells at, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Stunned, I just said eating my lunch. Well, he isn't buying it and says I'm hiding something. I just hold up my taco and looked so confused. He burst out laughing and peeled out. Saw him a few times after that and he always waved and had the biggest grin on his face. This will probably get buried, but here's my best story. I had a heroin addict who I arrested for a warrant. While searching her purse, I found a small container with a grayish brown substance in it, consistent with heroin. When I asked her what it was, she started laughing. She told me to test it because it wasn't heroin. I tested it and sure enough, the test came back negative. She explained to me that inside the container was the ashes of her dead cat. She said that when she goes to pick up heroin for her friends, she'll take some for herself and cut the rest with her cat's ashes. Her friends have been snorting or shooting up some of her dead cat.